In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Jasper. We talk about how HR turned from an admin function to a strategic function. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today. Jasper, it's great to have you on.
Hello, Benjamin. Look forward to the discussion.
Jasper, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jasper Ouden. I'm Dutch origin, but mainly worked and lived across Europe. So I'm married, 4 children, all multilingual, and that's maybe the core of my career and as well personal life that has been across different countries within Europe, and I'm mainly active in global HR. So I grew up, as mentioned, in the Netherlands, but then lived a couple of years and studied in Spain, where I did my MBA there. And then afterwards, worked in consulting at Willis Towers Watson, at Airbus for quite a chunk of my career, so around 16, 17 years in all types of different functions across Europe, at AkzoNobel and SR Technics in terms of companies. I love HR, more actually people leadership, and maybe we can dive deeper into that. I think, in my philosophy, HR is really a functional competence, whereas there's more to it, to this function, and that's all around people leadership, culture, and company development. So if we go a bit deeper in those topics, I would be very happy. Thank you.
That's super interesting. Since you have been around for quite a bit in the HR space, and you just mentioned HR used to be a very much admin focused function. However, now it's becoming much more about people development, being part of the strategy, being part of the future of the company, rather than just so payroll and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. I think how I see the HR is really you do need to have your functional mastery, right? So you do need to have an admin that in place, that is efficient, that runs correctly, that is probably now digitalized with the different platforms there are. So I think that's the basics, right? That must be there. Companies that did not make that journey, that really has to be done, because that's in the end the backbone that needs to function. You cannot enter into any discussion when in management or in leadership or strategy without having that in order. But that's as well true for the critical operational HR processes, so like talent acquisition or recruitment, however you call it, and development cycles of the company, right? The performance management cycle. But if you look at really the essentials, so admin has to be in place, your talent acquisition has to be in place. That's the minimum. When that's working, they progressively, based on your business acumen, you can enter into more areas, I think, in HR. Then you enter into the engagement part of it, employee surveys, culture development, leadership development, etc. And then I think a third stage is really when you are really partnering on a senior level, driving the strategy, right? And then competencies are much more important, that are not only HR related, but as well business competencies like supply chain knowledge, depending on your industry, right? But supply chain knowledge, financial knowledge, commercial knowledge, and those are business competencies that would be very helpful if you can bring that to the table. Not that you manage those areas, but for your comprehension of overall of the company, in order then to derive your people strategy from there. And I think that's an essential third level of competencies that HR has. For me, it's one of the most fascinating functions because it's very multidisciplinary, very broad, and it's that makes the day never boring, right?
I must say, in particular, the strategy part I find incredibly interesting, given, we live in a world where the talent scarcity, in particular when it comes to very qualified people, and therefore, HR or people function, or however you call it, it's absolutely critical how you get and how to retain the best talents, because otherwise you can't execute your business strategy.
Correct. I mean, people is and not only people itself, right? Of course the competencies are clear, but above all the mindset. So do you have a learning mindset? Are you able to deal with difficult situations? Are you resilient enough to overcome that and in a quick time? What's your risk profile? What's your risk appetite? Because business progresses by making calculated risks. For example, right? And I think that's the fascinating part. You need to look at the skills and competencies, or technical skills and competencies of employees that you hire, but above all, the mindset and the learning appetite of the person, because that's what you need when technologies change or when business environment change. How do you adapt? That will not be based on your critical skills that you had before, but those are the critical skills you're going to develop tomorrow. And I think that combination of, on one hand, relying on your core profile or your core critical skills of people, combined with this learning agility and mental agility to move beyond that and see the opportunities of the future, that I think is absolutely key. But not only that, I think is linked to strategy. So I think that's where you really should have the ownership as HR to drive the recruitment of the people, either from the outside or develop those from the inside, to gain increasingly responsibilities, either on project mode, either in organizational setting. But this as well, I think it goes one step further, and you enter then much more in the organizational development of the company. So what's the right organization setup? What is the right cost structure for the company? What's the right, how do you react to portfolio decisions? How do you react to digitalization projects of the company? And what are then the HR measures or people measures that either you drive as HR or you take on for your colleagues in the business to make it happen. That's, I think, the role to play within strategy. And that requires you as well to have an understanding of strategy, so that you know the language of strategy. So strategy is, in the end, is just another word for tactics of warfare in its most developed theme. So it's about understanding deeply, I think, business strategy, corporate strategy, geopolitical knowledge. All of that nurtures in the end your business acumen in order to enter the dialogue with your colleagues on these subjects.
Well, I think you mentioned a very interesting point there, that you need to speak the language. You need to be you need to understand how an organization works. How do you get HR teams ready for this? Because it is, for some HR teams, indeed, it is different to what they did before.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's very difficult because people might be ingrained in very known practices, right? So so it depends on the maturity of your HR organization. So if you have people that are really well established, good education, the basics are there, a business that has been encouraging to more broader business topics, because it in the end it's an interplay, right? It's in the interplay of senior leadership or the company asking for certain topics from HR. So if you only ask for a contract, then you get a contract. But if you ask more things from HR or to support, then the dialogue changes, right? So I think it's mainly driven by two things: the maturity of your existing team and the demand of the organization and the complexity of the demand of the organization that is driving the space for HR to grow in. When that space is there, then I think it's really step-by-step process, and I can give a concrete example. So if an organization is not that familiar yet with digitalization, I think as an HR leader, you need to support that organization to learn and fail, and to protect the team in that learning. And I think that's so that people in the team then get more comfortable, more self-aware, more confident in what they're doing, and then become great project leaders, for example, in that space. I experienced that now several times, creating the space for the team, supporting them, providing them with the learning tools that are available, and then you'd be surprised that an old-fashioned organization can convert into the best project managers in the company, for example, right? I mean, I concretely lived that experience.
How do you, it's super interesting what you said when it comes to failing. How do you, prepare your team for a situation where you learn and fail? Because, failing, in particular, when we talk, for example, people who used to be involved in, let's say, payroll, for them, failing is not an option, right? So you can't sorry, for this month, we don't pay any salary. You can't do that, right? And therefore, this shift of mindset towards okay, this is the admin stuff that needs to run perfectly. However, we need to be innovative and we need to adopt new technologies. And there we can fail, and it's perfectly fine if we do fail. How do you get that done in terms of mindset?
I think Benjamin, you described it rightly. There's two types of failure. There's the most simple transactional aspects. Okay, if you have a very junior administrator making a failure, that's part of the learning. Don't blame the people, right? I mean that's learning, and maybe I did not prepare the right onboarding for the person. So I think that's the simple way of looking at failure. Maybe one or two times there's a mistake, and then it should not happen anymore, right? Unless the person is really not fit for the role. So I think that's pretty simple. In terms of judgment of failure, what you are mentioning, that's much more complex. That is when you charge a new territory, and you need to develop new items, and there as well, then failure is actually part of the learning process, much stronger than the more transactional work. I think that as a leader, you need to create conditions for employees to fail and learn, and to speak up. I think the key ingredient is, first of all, very open communication and sharing, and as well openness on strengths and weaknesses within the team, even on an individual level, and being open about it, right? And then I think it's about being very supportive. I always say, hey, success is for the team, failure is mine. If it would be more on a senior level, right? I have very difficulty to just blame a person. Hey, this is your fault, etc. I rather take that on my account. So I think that protecting the employees, the colleagues, and creating and then I think a third element is really provide input. It's like little not provocations, but little inputs that opens the mind, that get access to learning. Cross function might not have anything to do with your area, but it's just interesting. So this culture of openness and learning, I think, as well, is a key ingredient.
in particular when it comes to input, well, it's of course great if you have a leader who helps with input, who helps with development. However, what would you advise people who listen to our podcast, who are very innovative, very advanced, however, they feel they're held back by their own managers?
A very challenging question, very difficult question, because you have you're dealing with the one hand with your relationship with the leader or with the colleague, at the same time with an individual you want to promote and you see more potential into that, right? And that's very difficult. I mean, I look always at the dialogue with the leader. I personally, I take a lot of care to connect directly with the talents in the organization and try to provide space, even if it's without outside of HR, to create practically the opportunities for them to shine. I think the next step is really to have an open dialogue with the leader, because the person will get frustrated and leave, right, ultimately. Another thing is, how can you bind people into maybe things not directly related to this leader? So can you put the person maybe on a project that is completely outside of that organization, and create a space for them for the individual to stand up and make it obvious for the others that this is a person that is contributing, right? So I think different ways to do it. But yeah, you need to pull out the person, provide maybe accelerated job opportunities, project work, stretch.
When you reflect on your career, when you started your career, you probably weren't aware of, well, how important strategy will become for the HR function. So can you talk us a bit through the stages of evolution you underwent?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So I started off, I think most important for me actually very early on was practically my education, right? So I did a bachelor's in management, economics and law in the Netherlands, then did an exchange with CEU San Pablo in Madrid. That's more the basic undergraduate education, right? The real trigger I got doing my MBA at IE Business School, which is a renowned business school based in Madrid, and there you really get into the importance of strategy, finance, marketing, and all of that, right? But at a very intense level, and it's where I discovered. Because at my time, you had practically most people were either going to investment banking, strategy consulting, or in the .com area, right? So in startups. And I was very intrigued by one of my professors, which was Angel Cabrera. He's now the president of Georgia Tech University in the US. He was giving organizational behavior, and I was very intrigued on what does people leadership mean for competitiveness of business, and that fascinated me. So again, it's not HR, it's about organizational behavior, it's about the competitiveness of business through people, and that became somehow a red line, quite consciously actually, that I wanted to work in the people space. I have both an affinity for strategy, understanding of business, and I have an affinity of people. But again, both people, the person, and people, the organizational structure, so culture, org design, etc. So that's the space where I wanted to operate in, and automatically you then come into more HR type of functions. So started to work at Towers Watson, and then Airbus was for me a very excellent school in terms of my development. I worked with fascinating people there that helped me on my road into the HR function. Numerous people that inspired me in the HR field. Most importantly, probably Thierry Baril, who's the CHRO of Airbus, who is so much visionary before his time. So the opportunity to work with him was absolutely great, but as well other colleagues within Airbus that I worked closely with. So because that's global structure, very political on the one hand, but very exciting in terms of technology development, complex. So it's a fascinating field to walk around. So I'm always grateful to that part. And then then you grow in your career, and it becomes more recurrent. Your different roles, right? But that gave me the big foundations for actually, I think, my MBA and my experience in Airbus, then AkzoNobel, ESA Technics. Those were I think, the background in which I was able to operate.
Perhaps this is a very vivid example of comparing cultures when you look at Airbus and its large American competitor, which obviously had some trouble in the recent years. And I think people kind of agree it's not that Boeing engineers are less capable than Airbus engineers, but it's probably an issue of leadership, an issue of company culture that did not empower the right people, but empowered the wrong people.
Yeah, I mean that's a very.
It's a tricky one.
It's a tricky question, but I think it's a live case on leadership, right? And I think Airbus was not perfect neither in the early 2000s, right? But too much politics and over business. So I think Airbus had its own troubles. The thing in Airbus, it has a great pride, but as well a great humility on the complexity of aerospace. I think that defines Airbus, and I think Airbus never reacted in any way with let's say, how you say it in German, Schadenfreude, towards Boeing, right? I mean that they understand the complexity of aerospace and the troubles that there are. The big difference, I mean, you probably see it all over the literature, but the big difference is that the engineers and the program managers, more program managers, I would say. Engineering is just a sub-skill of program leadership. Airbus is managed by the program leaders, right? And they understand the whole interdependencies between security requirements, legal requirements, technology development, manufacturing, people, finance, customers, stakeholders, all that space, suppliers, very deep supply chain, all that space. You need to have a lot of humility towards that ecosystem. At the same time, a huge preparation to be able to be successful, and that's not one person. The person needs to be absolutely top notch, with different multidisciplinary experiences, but then as well depending on that culture, as you mentioned, of development, but the engineering culture against, let's say, the financial shareholder culture, probably somehow the difference, but the impact is huge. And I think that nobody, I think Airbus has a very humble opinion around that.
Jasper, you just mentioned how important people are for the business strategy. I have a question for you to guess the following. So yesterday I saw an interesting statistic how many people a US company from the S&P 500 needs to generate $1 million in revenue. And in 1999, in 1990, it was around 7 people required to generate 1 million. Can you guess how many people you require now to generate 1 million?
I have no clue, Benjamin.
It's 2. So it went down, well, of course, save of inflation, but it went down from 7 people to 2 people to generate $1 million in revenue. I think this underlines perfectly how relevant individuals are to organizations. And so let's say you're working in an organization with where 7 people generate $1 million, and then one person leaves and the other one arrives. Okay, it's a little impact. However, now the impact is massive.
I think probably a lot to do with technology, right? That enabled a lot of people to have a higher impact. At the same time, I think the complexity of organizations grew as well, so that creates then as well more overhead and in order to manage the complexity. So probably it's a combination of technology development on the one hand, it's an accelerator, and bureaucratization on the other hand as a deaccelerator. But it's fascinating to see how companies then as well move away from these conglomerations and try to create nimbler structures, as well the role of private equity entering into significantly enter into the finance space, getting then practically new whole ecosystems are chopped up in a new way, and with new leadership and probably new powers are set into force I think as well thanks to private equity, right, and or other types of investors.
Jasper, one last question for you. So can you give us a bit of an outlook? How do you picture HR or the people function in 5 years?
Yeah, I think I think HR, so to a large extent, has been a laggard function. To catch up, for example, with finance. Of course, there are always exceptions, right? Especially with some individuals I had the opportunity to work with. I think the demands on HR are higher and higher. So that means that the demand for professionalization on the HR function to be a real business partner or business player is greater and greater. And I think the tolerance of let's say average HR or pure administrative HR is not there. At the same time, I don't think companies want whole HR armies neither. So I think there's one hand, digitalization will provide a much nimbler HR function, much more digitalized, more. I mean, the productivity that you have mentioned there. I mean, that's not that difficult, right? I mean, you can digitalize a lot of those HR processes and then get much more nimbler, and even in areas now with AI and things like that, where you not even need HR on those topics. So I think that will be much more nimbler, and then I think for the client interfacing part of the business, the demands will increase. So what is and that requires as well better prepared or broadly prepared HR people, either in specialized functions like compensation or in learning or in talent acquisition, or in the business partnering area space, where then I think HR is on par with finance, or should be on par with finance. I always say, hey, a leader has a right arm and a left arm. Does not matter which one, but often it's finance and it's HR. And I think the demands on both roles should be similar. One with more functional expertise in the finance realm, the other one more in the people realm, but the demands and the broad strategic view and the broad strategic counseling to leaders across most levels of the organization, I think it will be critical.
It's indeed very interesting what you said, that people need to specialize much more, and advancing a digital organization in HR is probably the best chance that people have the time and the resources to then focus on specialization rather than on kind of standardized admin tasks.
Yeah, I mean the admin task, I mean, should be like with your bank account. You should be able to consult it pretty easily, right? You don't need another person to hold your hand to access your bank account. So I think that should be optimized to the maximum. But you need as well then a few very capable persons to run that administration, right? Because it remains an administration with all its legal and contractual aspects that are related to that, and social services, blah blah blah. So I think that requires as well more. Often people say, yeah, admin is not important. Admin is absolutely critical, because that, in the end, if that does not work, you cannot do any of the other aspects of the work, because it will become a crisis and you need to solve it. So I think that has to be staffed with a few very capable employees. And actually, it's more like a supply chain function. So you supply and purchase topics. That's as well, I think, what's so fascinating about HR is that you can mirror within the function certain excellences from outside of the function, right? So within HR, you have a supply chain function, you have maybe a procurement function with your talent acquisition, you have maybe a strategy function with your strategic business partnering. So I think you can then land from these other functions that existed maybe already since decades, the skills that applies well on those specific areas, and to be able to orchestrate that, I think, is the key behind the future of HR.
Wonderful. Jasper, I have a very last question, and I would ask you for a very short answer. What are your top 3 questions you ask when you interview someone for your own team or for your organization?
Top 3, okay. I think, first, I'm very much interested in the person, so I'll try to keep it short. So where do you come from? Why are you interested in that function? And I don't like to discuss about weakness and things like that, and practically how can I help you to be successful.
Lovely. Jasper, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Was super interesting.
Thanks as well, Benjamin, and look forward to catching up again with you. Thank you.
Lovely. And thanks to all of you for listening in, and see you next time.